Vegeta, the Prince of the Saiyans, and constant second banana to our hero Goku. Will he ever surpass his longtime rival? Well, in some respects he already has. It sucks being the rival character of an anime. You spend your whole life being considered the cream of the crop among your peers, and then suddenly some dumb hero type comes around and spends the entire rest of the franchise one-upping you at every single turn, no matter how hard you work to keep your spot. With Vegeta being one of the most quintessential characters of this archetype, he has suffered the blunt side of this trope for decades. But while he may never truly become stronger than Goku, there are a few ways in which he actually surpasses our orange-wearing good guy. Now, far be it from me to in any way approve of classism, but if we're going by Saiyan societal standards, our spiky-haired fusspot over here has had one over on Goku from the very moment he was born. He's literally royalty. He is, after all, born Prince Vegeta, son of King Vegeta III of Planet Vegeta. You know, side note, that was always so weird to me. Like, is Vegeta a title given to Saiyan royals? Or is the royal family named after the planet? Personally, I like to imagine that they just ego-tripped so hard one time during Saiyan history that they renamed the planet after themselves. That sounds like a very Vegeta thing to do. Anyway, Vegeta was not only born with a high power level for a Saiyan, but he likely received special training and education as well, the latter of which is something we'll get into later. By contrast, since Saiyans get sorted into social classes based on their power level at birth, Goku is stated to be a lower class warrior. And in terms of education, well, you know, this is Goku we're talking about. And I mean, if you ignore little tiny insignificant details like the entire planet blowing up and their species being nearly extinct, Vegeta is technically the king of Saiyans now. And of course, class recognizes class. So what did Vegeta do once he ended up having to live on Earth? Why, he hooked up with the super genius multi-billionaire daughter of the owner of a massive tech corporation, of course. Guess it must be hard to let go of that royal lifestyle. Hey, wait a minute. If Vegeta is king, then that makes Trunks and Bra the prince and princess of Saiyans respectively. And that means Bulma is the queen of Saiyans. Oh god, let's hope nobody punched that out to her. Her head is big enough as it is already. So, are any of you people watching this by any chance old enough to remember back when the Great Ape form was like a really big deal? Way back in Dragon Ball Classic, Goku looking at the full moon and turning into a colossal berserker beast meant trouble for absolutely everyone, only ever solved by either chopping off his tail or blowing up the moon. Even when Gohan was a kid, the very idea of him turning into a Great Ape again was enough to make Piccolo blow up the moon a second time. Yeah, Dragon Ball Earth goes through moons like the rest of us go through laundry. Anyway, as powerful as the Great Ape form is, Saiyans cannot control it. Or at least lower class warriors can't. But Vegeta is not only capable of staying perfectly in control of himself and even speaking while in the Great Ape form, he can even trigger it at will thanks to a technique that allows him to create a ball of light that mimics the properties of moonlight. That's not just a powerful little ball of energy he's got there. That's something that must require a lot of finesse and precise key control to pull off. And if you think Vegeta is scary the way he is now, what with having unlocked straight up godly levels of power, just try and imagine him turning into a Great Ape with his mind still intact nowadays. Now, we don't know for sure if the ability to control the Great Ape is something that can be taught or if it's an ability you have at birth, but if it's the first one, then maybe Saiyans should stop chopping off their tails and take some lessons in self-control from Vegeta. Yeah, okay, I totally hear how crazy that sounds. Speaking of transformations, Goku has an absolutely staggering amount of forms at this point. Super Saiyan 1 through 3, Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan Blue, Ultra Instinct, and even Super Saiyan 4 if we take GT into account, which we will do a few times on this list. But when Goku achieves his forms, it's usually a result of some kind of emotional distress or while training under a master. Watching Krillin get killed by Frieza turned him Super Saiyan 2 and 3 were unlocked by training with King Kai in the afterlife, Super Saiyan 4 required a combination of turning Great Ape, going Super Saiyan, and being exposed to Blues waves. Yes, that's what they're called, stop giggling. Super Saiyan God needed 5 Saiyans to donate their power through a ritual, and Super Saiyan Blue and Ultra Instinct were both unlocked training with Whis. Of course, there is some debate on whether or not Ultra Instinct is more of a technique than a form, but the dude gets a new hair color out of the deal, so I'm just gonna call it a form. Now, while Vegeta skipped Super Saiyan 3, at least on screen, and has not yet achieved Ultra Instinct, although the manga did introduce the Ultra Ego form instead, he earned most of his forms through his own strength rather than any outside influences. Vegeta didn't need to watch a friend get murdered to turn Super Saiyan. He just trained his tail off, because if Goku can do it, then so can he, dammit. And at least according to the Dragon Ball Super anime, Vegeta somehow achieved the Super Saiyan God state without needing to perform the ritual. Vegeta is like that annoying younger sibling in that way. If Goku gets something, then he wants it too. The difference is that he buckles down and works until he gets it instead of whining about it. That is, unless Team 4 Star's version of events is more accurate than we realize.
I wanna be a Super Saiyan! I wanna!
So the Saiyans are, how shall I say this, maybe not the most cultured species you can find in the Dragon Ball universe. They're rough, tumble, usually simple-minded, and base all of their societal standing and values on how much power they were born with as literal babies. But they do still have some admirable qualities, and none of that means that Vegeta is any less proud of his heritage. Likely due to the bump on the noggin Goku got back when he landed on Earth, he has never really cared that much about Saiyan history or culture. Sure, he appreciates meeting Saiyans and has accepted them as part of his identity, but he's not exactly in any hurry to live up to their values or really study them. Vegeta, on the other hand, always wears his Saiyan pride on his sleeve. Not only is he always dressed in various styles of Saiyan armor whenever he gets ready for battle, he also makes sure to keep his species' customs alive through his son, who he puts through vigorous training that is probably not entirely unlike what he endured as a child. Although he does at least promise to take his son to an amusement park as a reward. I mean, he's an alien monkey prince, not a monster. And it even extends to other Saiyans as well. When he meets the Universe 6 Saiyans, he doesn't truly have a problem with them being more altruistic thanks to decades of character development, but more with the fact that this means they've gotten relatively weak compared to the ones from Universe 7. Now, old Vegeta might have taken offense to that and started blasting, but modern Vegeta instead decides to make it his duty to properly train them, even if his way of doing so with Kappa is kind of brutal. Okay, so he's still a little bit of a monster, but come on, would we really love him if he wasn't? Speaking of Saiyan values, it's actually interesting to note that while Goku's relationship with Frieza makes for one of the most iconic hero-villain pairings in basically all of anime, Vegeta actually has a much more personal grudge against the little smarmy overlord. And really, he arguably has more reasons to consider him an archenemy than Goku does. It was, after all, Frieza who enslaved the Saiyan race and absorbed them into his empire, only to then blow up the planet and almost kill all of them once he figured they became a bit too bothersome for his liking. And where Goku was already living on Earth at that time with no idea what a Saiyan even was, Vegeta had his homeworld destroyed, watched his father die, lost everything he had aside from a couple of loyal stooges, and ended up working for the creep that caused all of it. So what did he do the instant he believed he had enough power to pull it off? Why, he started absolutely rip and tearing through all of Frieza's elite soldiers like he was the freaking Doomslayer. The guy barely even slowed down until Recoome beat those goofy looking shoulder pads right off of him. Plus, his hatred towards Frieza is so great that it's one of the few things that have made him set aside his pride. He willingly worked with the Sea Fighters to take him down. He allowed someone he saw as a lesser fighter to near fatally wound him so he could get a power boost, and he even outright begged Goku to fight for Saiyan honor on his deathbed. That's a Saiyan whose heart bleeds for his people right there. Along with his mouth. And most of his body. And probably most of his internal organs. That looks like it hurts, man. For a character who started out possibly being one of the most powerful and vile villains our heroes had ever faced, considering he was willing to pretend to help his subordinate and then murder him on the spot, Vegeta is also, strangely enough, kind of incorruptible once he actually fully turns to the side of good. Vegeta is a veritable magnet for possessions, mind alterations, and other crazy stuff that attempts to take advantage of his ego and his resentment of Goku. And while some of them, like the famous Majin transformation that he got from Babidi, are self-inflicted in some misguided attempt at returning to what he considers his glory days, he always manages to snap out of it on his own accord. Be it realizing how good he has it with his wife and son in the Majin Buu arc and sacrificing himself to atone for his actions, or his consciousness just being so strong that his copy was unaffected by Kamaru-san's control, Vegeta absolutely will not let someone else dictate his actions. If he can help it. Frieza was a bit of a special case. Even his new Ultra Ego form from the Dragon Ball Super manga, while it amplifies many of his more negative traits, is ultimately under his control, and it has not yet caused him to go fully berserk. And before you bring him up, yes, the one person who did manage to keep Vegeta under control for any meaningful length of time was Baby from Dragon Ball GT. But he was an alien parasite that literally took over Vegeta's body on a cellular level rather than a transformation or a copy. So I'm willing to give him a pass on that one. Also because that whole series is considered non-canon anyway. That helps too. Now there's no doubt that Goku is immensely powerful, and with the power of status quo on his side, he's gonna stay that way, with Vegeta never quite catching up. But once again, the Saiyan Prince does have one thing going for him that the lower class warrior does not. And that is a fighting style that is uniquely his own. Goku has since the beginning of the series been absolutely excellent at learning techniques he observes from others. He learned the Kamehameha just by watching it being used once, and even when he encounters a technique he physically cannot copy, he will usually find a way to emulate its effect. But that's just it. Almost all of Goku's moves come from various masters or enemies, with very few of them being his own invention. Kamehameha? Roshi taught him that. Solar Flare? Tien. Flying? Kami. Kaioken? Spirit Bomb? King Kai taught him those. Destructo Disc? That's all Krillin. Instant Transmission? You can thank the Yadrats for that one. And so on and so forth. Goku is a great fighter, no question, but a large part of it comes from being a total technique sponge. By comparison, Vegeta has a moveset that's more his own, including such classics as the Gallic Gun, the Big Bang Attack, and the Final Flash. It is possible that these are techniques passed down in the Saiyan royal family, but since he's the only one of those left, that still leaves him with his own signature style. Really, in terms of having the most personalized moveset, he's mainly rivaled by even more alien characters like Majin Buu and Piccolo, or the more mystically inclined like Tien and Roshi. And speaking of advantages that may have come with growing up as royalty, Vegeta happens to also be more knowledgeable about Saiyans and the universe as a whole. After his introduction and eventual joining of the main Sea Fighter team, however reluctant, he is usually the one to drop knowledge on the physiology of Saiyans or the limits of their techniques whenever new details are introduced. He was the only character that referenced the original legend of the Super Saiyan before he even truly sought the transformation for himself, and when Beerus was introduced back in the Battle of Gods movie, Vegeta already knew of him through a meeting with his father that occurred during his childhood. It's likely that, on top of having special training as part of his princely privileges, Vegeta has also received some sort of formal education, including a greater understanding of how his universe functions. This is also supported by how he first acts somewhat more formal and cultured than the simple-minded Goku or his more outwardly bloodthirsty henchmen Nappa and Raditz. Not that prepared him for learning that his universe was just 1 out of 12, mind you. That one was a surprise. Let's be honest, Goku is pretty static as far as protagonists go. Not to say that he doesn't get any development as the series goes on, mind you. He does go from being a wild child so sheltered that he literally doesn't understand that a different sex exists and who can barely keep track of his own age, to a spacefaring warrior trained by literal gods after all. But his core personality as a friendly, if simple man who's mostly concerned with where he's gonna find a cool new fighter to spar with next has remained largely unchanged in spite of everything that's happened. Vegeta, on the other hand, has become a very different character over the course of the series, and has learned a lot from everything he's been through. His pride certainly hasn't gone away, and he still really enjoys lording his strength over others, but he has developed a healthier outlook on himself and his abilities, and learned to accept his new life as it is, rather than clinging to a time when he was the prince of a world-conquering species of space barbarians. He definitely still has a burning desire to surpass Goku, but it no longer drives him to being outright homicidal in order to do so. And that's not even getting into how great of a family man he's become, so why don't we give that a segment of its own? Now, we all love to throw around some Goku is a terrible parent jokes. As much as his bad traits are exaggerated to make them work, there is some level of truth to it. Sure, many of Goku's absences from his children's lives can be explained with literally being dead or lost in space for a while, but he has his other failings too. As nice as Goku is, he doesn't seem to take an awful lot of interest in anything his children want to do that isn't directly related to fighting. Plus, he is absolutely never living down what he pulled on Gohan back in the Cell games, but at least he acknowledged that one and felt pretty bad about it. But who could possibly have imagined that Vegeta would end up being the better family man of the two? Yeah, he's stern and temperamental, and he puts his son through some really hard training, but he's not above promising rewards as a form of positive reinforcement. And even though he spends the entire promised amusement park trip being utterly miserable, he still toughs it out for as long as he can, which his family clearly appreciates. Besides, Vegeta telling Trunks to button his shirt properly is super cute, no matter how gruff he is about it. Fight me. He was willing to humiliate himself to save Bulma when Beerus visited. He wanted to be around for Bra's birth. And if we once again count Dragon Ball GT, he's perfectly accepting of the fact that Bra has no interest in martial arts training, even pausing his own to take her shopping. He even shaves that stupid mustache for her. Oh, and we can't forget his brother Tarple, who Vegeta is pretty civil to despite his relative weakness, and whose wife Gurei he shows proper respect. He's certainly a much better big brother than Raditz was. Not that Raditz makes for stiff competition. So Vegeta not only comes from royal blood, he's also incredibly strong and a great husband and father? No wonder fans line around the block to hook up with this guy. But, I'm sorry folks, he's taken. So there you go, Vegeta. You'll probably never fully overtake Goku in terms of power, but you show him up in plenty of other areas where it counts. And believe me, The fans love you for it. Good show, Your Highness.